Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean, broadcasting live once again from behind the Blue Iron Curtain. I apologize for the technical glitch. I had a microphone error that I had to correct real quick. So today's title of today's podcast is Cultural Impacts, the 2A, just like incompetence of the government impacts the 2A. And what we're seeing, what I am seeing specifically, I'm sorry, I keep thinking of myself in third person, and it's because I'm trying to keep my audience in the loop with this because I see it as you guys seeing it too. Maybe that's not always obvious, but it is true. I don't understand the Biden administration, and I've said this multiple times, but we've always been attacked in the 2A community, but this attack recently is kind of a backhanded way, and we're already seeing a governor of New York back them in a weird way. And what I'm talking about is the energy sector. Now, there are, in my opinion, I have dealt with energy guys my entire life living in northwest New Mexico. These guys are the lifeblood of New Mexico. And what I mean by that is they pay for infrastructure, they pay for the schooling, they pay for most charities in the area. And it makes no sense that New Mexicans, specifically, keep supporting Democrats. And here's why. I'm going off on this. And to be honest, supporting any politician, let's be real. But Biden's administration came out yesterday and said that gas stoves or gas connections in the home, natural gas connections, cause an increase to breathing problems. What is it called? Asthma. There we go. So here's where I have a problem with this. You're taking one of the most cleanest burning fuel that gives us the most energy we could possibly get other than gasoline, and you want to take it off the market. So they're already using the terms like stakeholder. And anytime a company, a business, or any large entity starts using stakeholder, they're wanting that ESG stupid woke bullcrap. Now, it's one thing to serve your customers and consider them stakeholders in your company because they are what support you. Remember, the right funds the left, and that's been our problem. But where I see the problem is even Hochul from New York was saying they're going to ban gas stoves and natural gas appliances in homes. Now, long term, if we had nuclear power or fusion of any kind that we could count on, that'd be great. However, that's not the case. Most of our energy in the United States and around the world still comes from fossil fuels. And anyone who thinks that you can just plug into the wall doesn't realize the realities of where the energy's coming from. And in New Mexico, as much as we've dedicated to renewable energies for the future, and in New Mexico, that probably makes sense because we get 6.5 hours or 6 3/4 hours of sunlight every day. So yeah, that could help pay New Mexicans' light bills. I'm kind of cool with that. But demonizing the natural gas guys that have to, natural gas and oil guys that are going out there, they're providing energy for the Northwest, for the West Coast, for a lot of places other than New Mexico. And that revenue comes directly to our coffers in the state, and that impacts how much you pay on taxes, that impacts the infrastructure that we're getting, and time again, we're getting screwed. And all you guys that line up with the Democrats, and yeah, I'm calling you out because it's time somebody does, keep siding with the green agenda. But the real sad part about this is you're not looking at reality. New Mexico has several places where it is too cold for electric vehicles. We live too far apart for electric vehicles. Can they help in your city life? Absolutely. Should you pay $60,000 for a car that probably costs you more in carbon If you want it for a status symbol or you want it just because it's that kind of car, absolutely. I'm not telling you not to buy anything. What I do want is I want people to quit demonizing the natural gas and fossil fuel industries, because all of what we get in New Mexico from the government comes from those revenue streams. They've recently legalized cannabis in the area. We won't see that for a year or two as it comes in, as the proceeds from the taxes come in. That will be a revenue changer, and it will help us. But until then, it makes no sense to go after natural gas specifically when we actually freeze. And gas is one of those fuels used in our energy equation that's elastic, meaning that we can use it to spin up the rest of the power demand the country needs. It makes no sense to go 100% green because of this type of thing. But it also shows that there's cultural impact here. It's all those woke leftist people that think they're doing good but are dumb as a box of rocks when it comes to the realities of the situation in the world. These are the people we've been fighting from the 2A advocacy side since we became 2A people. And I say that because these blind, mindless robots, NPCs, so to speak, are the ones that vote for the stupidest laws on the books. Specifically, with the new session kicking off in the Roundhouse, they're looking at, like I've said, the magazine bans for modern firearms. Now, there's multiple repercussions of this. But look at our culture in general. When's the last time you went to a really good movie that kept you hooked? Now, I've had some people tell me Avatar did that. The last movie for me was Maverick. I have not been motivated to see any movie since Maverick, Top Gun, came out. And to be honest, it was one of the best movies I've seen in modern times, other than like John Wick. And yeah, I'm a little biased. Yeah, I like guns. Yeah, I like action movies more specifically. But you're not seeing any development of our culture. In fact, you're seeing it degrade. Now, I'm a bigger frame person. I have been since I was a kid. And it's poor life choices, my lack of motivation to get out and work out as much as I should, that has gotten me where I'm at. Now, the repercussions from that. I've had to take blood pressure medicine. I've now weaned myself off of that because I've changed my diet enough to where I've dropped down. But what I'm seeing is disturbing. Parade, which is coming out showing off some Gen Z branding, I guess is what they're having, has a morbidly obese set of models. Now, while I don't want to fat shame anybody because I am a fat person, and I know that, but I am well aware of the risks and what I'm doing, and I've never been one of those people that have just reveled in the fact that I'm a big guy. I don't sit there and stuff Oreos down my throat. This is really because of the line of work I was in. That'll change. And believe it or not, over the COVID crap, I've lost 50 pounds consecutively, a total of 75 pounds because I've yo-yoed. And seeing this stuff, you have to come to terms with some hardcore reality. When you go talk to your doctor, if you're expecting your doctor just to like sign on and say, yeah, you're doing great, and they're too afraid to talk to you, they're not doing their job. Their job is to keep you healthy, keep you alive. And seeing people like my mom, who is morbidly obese, again, remember, culture breeds culture. If you were raised around that type of life choice, tends to happen more often than not. That's why you see drug people getting it. It's a cascading effect. And both law enforcement and the school systems have been dealing with that for a long time. But where we need to go with this is be honest with ourselves. You know, if you can't see your knees like the poor lady I've seen in that photo, and her shoes look like she's actually binding her feet, you got some problems that are going to come down later in life. One, you're going to have hypertension. I can speak to that directly. Two, you're going to have sleeping problems. Three, you're never going to find anything to fit unless you find some custom place. Now, the free market does provide, and I'm all for free market capitalism. But you have to look at yourself in reality. Do you want to be this person? And that's where I'm changing. And I have been changing. But I continue to work at that because it's always bothered me. And to see people say, well, this is normal and you should just normalize it, bothers me because it's not healthy. You know, my doctor was very frank. That's part of why I got the stupid first round of COVID stuff. And when he talked about it, he says, yeah, this is experimental, yeah, but it looks like it's doing a lot of benefits for a lot of people. And he says, more specifically, he said, you have hypertension, you're overweight, those two combining, and you're on the way to diabetes if you don't fix this, and that's what my driving force is to get better, and why I was tired of being behind a desk for most of my life. And what it led me down that path was thinking, thank you for being honest. When he said those two things, the other thing he said was, those seem to be the most pressing things, conditions, that determine your COVID outcome. Now, I wasn't afraid of COVID. I still am not, and I've had it. It sucks. God, it sucks. But it's not a life-ending thing if you take steps to mitigate it. I've had friends who are healthy as hell, and the most thing they lost was smell and taste for a little bit, and they had the sniffles. Mine knocked me to the dirt for about a week and a half. So health matters. That's where cultural influence comes in, and we can't let the culture fight us off. For too long, the 2A guys, we've sat back, and we've just tried to advocate against the politics. We knew that the people in D.C. and we knew the people in L.A. and Hollywood in general have lost their mind a long time ago. However, the problem is that these people have now grown enough roots that you have to fight them at every level. Look at Alyssa Milano. She's a decent actress, or was, but she's gone nuts on several issues that apply to the culture war, but eventually will impact the 2A. And if you don't believe me, they're normalizing the fact that violence can be words. That means that any extreme violence that you have to use to defend yourself is going to demonize you 100%. Case in point, look at what happened in Texas, and I talked about the shooting at the Taqueria. I believe it was in Texas. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can catch me in chat to correct anything, which is on Spreaker.com. Or if you want to interact and have a question about the 2A or just how I feel about something, send me a text from Spreaker.com on their chat section when you listen to the podcast. You can also email me at atin082@gmail.com. If you have suggestions for story ideas for the podcast. But where I'm going with that cultural aspect of it is when they normalize behavior, it's not a slippery slope like we've always thought. It's a freaking cliff. And what I mean is you're starting to see more and more people just going off-scale nuts. And sure, it may start with kids' drag shows, and you're like, yeah, whatever. I don't care if they have drag or whatever, and I just want to be left alone. But I assure you, normalizing that stuff with kids, adult entertainment, stripper-type behavior, that's what I'm going after here. That's not okay. But back to the Taqueria guy. He's being demonized now for how many rounds he used. And to me, yeah, it does seem a little excessive. But I wasn't put in that situation. I don't know what the threat matrix in his mind was, the shooter, the guy that defended himself and the people in the restaurant was. But I understand one aspect of that very well, and that's to end the threat completely. You know, part of having to use a firearm means you're probably going to be dealing with that fatality scenario, whether yourself or the person you're having to stop from being a moron. And more often than not, reasonable people will come down to reasonable solutions and reasonable answers. The problem with this gentleman was he shot the man while he was down, and then it looks like he finished him off, and people are saying that's an execution. I don't see it that way. It isn't incumbent on the victims to justify their force, their level of force, once they've had to use force. And where I'm going with that is the fact that this guy had a gun, and it was a BB gun, but I take you to that little scenario. What, in that split-second moment where you have to react or die, what would you think? Would you take the shot, or would you take the beating, or would you take being killed because you're afraid of hurting someone else? And has your life become that generic that you're willing to forfeit it for the sake of everybody else? Now, I've had to think about that a lot, because I understand using a firearm is going to set off another set of chain of events that's going to suck for the person that had to do it. That's why I keep insurance. That's why I have a plan if that ever happens. I pray it never does. But the cultural impacts of this are starting to show up, especially in northwest New Mexico. One of my things of entertainment, one of my modes of entertainment, is listening to the police radio, because I want to know what's going on in my area, and we've long since not had a news outlet here that was worth a dang. So I listen to the police radio because I can hear events that may impact me in real time. And what you find when you listen to that, I feel, like I said, I have had a very tenacious relationship with law enforcement in the last 3 years. I think everybody has. Because I was a dyed in the blue and the wool, back the blue guys all the time. Then COVID hit, and I saw who was enforcing those unconstitutional mandates. And yeah, I hold them to fire, and yeah, I talk about them all the time, and yeah, I actually have talked to law enforcement guys head to head and said, hey man, I feel for what you're doing, but where I was going with that stuff with the radio, you know how many times people are called for not doing their job as a parent? And I'm not talking about your kid has gone nuts and is just fucking losing their mind, pardon my French, losing their mind, and they think you're the devil. No. I'm talking about people that are throwing wall-eyed fits, that they're not getting their way, and law enforcement has to intercede. Where did we go wrong with the culture when we start having kids do this, and they're propped up by society? The parents are at a Mexican standoff, there's no other way to put it. If they discipline the child, they are abusive. If they don't discipline them, then the child becomes combative and ends up in the system. How do we fight that? Because that is key to the Second Amendment fight we fight, because it leads to that 2% I talk about ad infinitum that shouldn't have firearms. And I get discouraged, like most people, when you see the cultural stuff pop up, like the idiots trying to ban gas. Then you start seeing people that are bucking the system. If you hadn't seen Bill Maher push back on Neil deGrasse Tyson, who isn't a very good scientist, very good astronomer, he's very interesting. And he seems reasoned, but a very biased leftist. And what I like about the discussion that Bill Maher had with Tyson was, or deGrasse, let's use what they call him all the time, the reason why I think it was important was it was about the lockdowns and what happened as the blowback from that. And Maher went off and said, look, we didn't do it right in the United States. We totally screwed this up. And Tyson pushed back, or Degrassi pushed back and said, no, we didn't have the benefit of knowing these things. And Mayer pushed back again and said, yes, we did. We had other countries' responses to COVID and how they reacted. Early on, we knew that herd immunity was something we were trying to get to. Yes, there are places that have lower population density, and that may have worked better, right? But the fact is, the discussion was being shut down in the United States, and we're finding out more and more that the government literally went to social media places and businesses and censored dissent. Now, our founding fathers are rolling in their grave, I'm sure, for a number of reasons, but this one would really bite them because this is how the republic dies. If you basically get ruined for dissenting, our culture has failed. Now, I'm not talking about dissenting into like something like child pedophilia. That shit should be squarely off the table. And the fact that there's this weird fringe that keeps trying to push this in communities that are already marginalized, so they're looking for allies anyway. I think this is the worst possible outcome because they're going to put two groups of marginalized people together, one of which is marginalized for a damn good reason and they shouldn't be around them. How many times do we have to get up and say, not the kids? Quit messing with the kids. With the new outbreak in China that's going on with COVID, they're saying there's probably 3 or 4 new variants of COVID. Now, whether they're deadly or not, we won't know until they escape China. But why does this bother me? Because COVID was a huge red pill to me. It's to see the government that I had helped support for 23 years, working for them in one way or another, come out in support of curtailing human rights, going against something as simple as the Nuremberg laws or foundings or whatever you want to call them, because they were afraid and no one would take ownership. Save one man, DeSantis. DeSantis stood up and said, yeah, if you want, the vaccines are cool. If you want to do that, that's cool. We're going to make it available. We're going to make every treatment available. And we're going to look at this with hard, real eyes that look at the full impact. And while Florida had their fight, and yeah, they have an older population, they came out on top. And for all of us behind the blue wall, the blue iron wall, this is inspiration. And we just want our... I have no delusions that the Democrats in New Mexico will always run New Mexico. What I hope for all the time is that there's some reasonable people that stand up and say no. And that this seems to be a weird thing in New Mexico where the cult has a huge hold on population centers. And any dissent isn't allowed. Specifically when it comes to things like pollution or perceived pollution. The energy stuff here is a big deal in New Mexico. You cannot wean us off of that. You cannot do it without fully finding something for other people to do for a living here, unless you want all the people that are associated with those fields to have to leave. Then you're talking about cities dying, schools dying, and then what are you going to do? Your tax base is gone. New Mexico is one of those states that's seeing that. But there's a lot going on in New Mexico that could make this better, and that's why I'm not willing to cast it aside. There are vast swaths of land that the 2A has been, sanctified. My own sheriff in the area said, no, we're not doing this stuff. Now he said, we'll leave it up to the courts to do some of this stuff. That's where I have the problem, is the courts are holding the line for right now, but only because we got the right people in while we could. And the left right now is looking at packing the courts to overrule that. What bothers me most is you're seeing people at the highest levels of government ignoring the law and going after their own benefit, is the best way to put it. You know, I could sit here and we could talk about how great Biden was, or they think Biden was. But the man fired the prosecutor, had the prosecutor of Ukraine fired. Okay? We need to have some serious conversations about that. So why aren't we? And why aren't we trying to change the culture? On a bright note, I had the opportunity to take 3 young people shooting yesterday with my son. And if you want to be an advocate for the 2A, that's how you do it. Because 2 of these people swore they would never own firearms. After yesterday and them trying out the one that they were secretly thinking about getting, they now confirmed to themselves they're getting one. And the female that was there, because one of them brought their girlfriend, was actually very changed about this. And that's what we need to start talking and doing. You know, Tim's going out and he's skating this weekend. Why? Because he's tired of the crap and he's like, we need to influence culture. The only way I know to influence culture is by supporting my kids, supporting the Second Amendment, being an advocate, and going out and doing things like that because it spreads the culture. The 2A is for everyone. I don't want to hear that it's not. I'm sick and tired of seeing people get demonized for exercising their rights that have been theirs since the inception of our country. Our country's 240 some odd years old. And I should be able to tell you that. But I always get confused whether it's 245, 246, or 247. At that, I think it's the best country on planet Earth because we do have those freedoms and we can have those discussions if we're willing to have them. But we're not. And that's where you have to put it on the line and say, no, enough's enough. Are you going to let them demonize you for having a gas stove and a gas water heater? Because that's what's coming down the pipe. And if you're willing to do that, what's to stop them from just making you unable to defend yourself? And they've been doing that for years now. Don't give these guys an inch because they'll take a mile. Take it from someone who's been fighting the 2A battle since I was 20-something years old. I've been to rallies, I've watched all this stuff, and I can tell you, the NRA was a great idea. LaPierre screwed it up. And they had a chance to rectify it several times, and they haven't. If you're giving money to the NRA, stop. Go talk to Firearms Policy Coalition. Go talk to New Mexico Shooting Sports. Go talk to GAO. These guys are consistently trying to raise the red flag and say, stop it, not one more inch. The Truth About Guns Firearms blog. The Firearms blog. These guys, they try to show you the cool stuff, but they also try to inform you. That's what sparked me to get into this. You know, after the shooting in Aztec, we sat out there, or I went out there with my friends, and we went hard. And when I say we went hard, we went hard. We were trying to stop them from spreading more gun rules in New Mexico, and it worked. They're trying it again, guys. This is a never-ending battle. And while I understand a lot of us don't want to get into this, you have to. You have to get out and you have to be vocal about what the hell is going on in your life. And you have to be willing to pick up what someone puts down, and even if it's at your detriment. Because if you don't take a stand, they'll be coming for you next. Like, share, subscribe. Please subscribe. Please share this podcast. We're trying to get this up off the ground. or I'm trying to get this off the ground with the help of my kids and my family, and I'm looking at starting a business, but until my capital comes in, this is it. Be great.